How is this possible? Calcis' mind was completely blank. The only thought in his mind was that one sentence. He could not figure out how a dragon hatchling had managed to survive, remain unharmed from his divine parting. Unless one were present at the scene, most would have treated this as some kind of exaggerated joke. After all, divine parting was Calcis' most powerful skill. It was an extremely powerful S-class skill that only a select few individuals on the continent were allowed to learn. A-class skills were already powerful enough to cause a bloodbath. It was for this reason that they were treated as massive assets. Even before the continent was unified, the amount of A-class abilities that existed on the continent were few and far between. They were assets that were as rare as phoenix feathers. However, if A-class skills were already this rare, what did it make of the rarer and even more vicious S-class skills? It was not an exaggeration to say that the old king would willingly invade an entire city-state, an entire nation, all to obtain a single S-class skill. In a way, S-class skills were like the nuclear warheads that were owned by various countries back in Max's previous life. They were weapons of mass destruction, capable of disintegrating most life forms to dust. Unless circumstances necessitated it, one was not to use an S-class skill casually. After all, should a foreign state come to learn of its existence, war would undoubtedly ensue. The reason Calcis had openly used the S-class skill was due to the fact that the current king had already unified the continent. It was also for this reason that Calcis had not once used the divine parting back during the Great War. He assumed that so long as he possessed the divine parting, the one-year-old red dragon, Max, would be blown into oblivion. However, reality had given him a heavy slap across his face. Impossible. I can't believe it. You're merely a dragon hatchling. How can you be unharmed? You should have died. Calcis had seemingly entered a trance. If Max were to hold back at this moment, then he would truly be a fool. Being merciful to the enemy was the greatest cruelty to oneself. Max refused to lose here just because he had shown sympathy to his opponent. While countless individuals on the ground cried out in an attempt to snap Calcis back to reality, Max suddenly fired a bolt of lightning that pierced through Calcis' heart. Rip! A hole the size of a football appeared in Calcis' chest. Calcis could feel his strength seeping away from him. He lowered his head in disbelief and stared at where his heart once used to be. How can this happen? Fresh blood started to flow out from Calcis' mouth and nose. His strength was declining. The brilliant light that had lit up the night sky also vanished at this moment. The world descended into darkness once more. Calcis was rapidly losing his strength. He was losing his grip on the two massive greatswords in his hands. His face began to turn pale, as if all his blood had been drained from him. His originally brilliant golden hair had also turned white. This is absolutely impossible. This is an illusion. All of this is fake. I don't believe it. Calcis used his already hoarse voice to roar weakly. His mana reserves was no longer capable of sustaining the cross under his feet. Your pride has consumed and ultimately destroyed you, Calcis. On the ground, an extremely weathered voice came from the luxurious carriage. It was as if that voice had already passed through countless years. You lost, Calcis. Calcis lost all his strength in an instant. At this moment, he was no different from an 80-year-old man. The two greatswords also slid down from his hands. Due to their weight, they were the first to fall onto the ground. Sir Calcis actually lost the battle. Felix's pupils shrank to the size of pinholes. He looked at the falling Calcis body in disbelief. Naturally, Max was not about to let such a great source of nutrients get away from him. Right before Calcis' life energy had completely left him, Max flew to his side and broke his neck in one swift motion. Calcis was once the favored son of heaven, an existence that countless people relied on. He was a heroic general who, under the king's orders, had unified the entire continent. However, even a genius such as himself had died miserably to a mere dragon hatchling. Max fired a stream of lightning breath to roast Calce's corpse, and following this, he then swallowed Calce's body whole. Countless soldiers collapsed and screamed in terror. Fear had gripped the soldiers' souls. The strength that Calce had displayed earlier had caused many to revere him as their god. Calce, who represented their hope, had perished. This was undoubtedly a devastating blow to all the soldiers present. The tragic death of Calce had triggered the collapse of the human army. Countless soldiers who were not mentally feeble began to flee. Had they not seen Calce in all his glory, perhaps, they might have been able to endure his death. They could not stand this meaningless crusade any longer. No, it was more accurate to say that this was no longer a battlefield to them, but rather, a slaughterhouse that belonged to the dragon hatchling. Since their discovery of the dragon hatchling, the human army had already expended 3 dragon-vanquishing ballistae, and more than 1,000 soldiers had already died. Furthermore, they had even lost Calce, the strongest member among them. How could weak existences like them be a match for the red dragons? They were a ragtag bunch of soldiers that were provided by the various lords of the nation to the king. There was no way they would fight a battle where they were destined to lose. They had only one life. If they died, it was gone for good. A crusade against the dragons. For the sake of the nation. Screw it all. Our life takes precedence. Silence. Silence, all of you. Anyone who deserts the army will be killed without mercy. Felix looked at the human army that was on the brink of collapse and roared. After all, with Calce now gone, the army was the final deterrence against the monstrous red dragon hatchling. However, Felix had learned the hard way that his shout earlier was in vain. The red dragon hatchling had terrified them more than Felix, and as a result, the army began to collapse like dominoes. It was like an avalanche. Once it started, it could not be stopped.
Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
Panic. Pandemonium. Chaos. At this moment, Max's existence was like a nightmare that corroded the soldiers' hearts. Of course, there was no lack of strong-willed people within the human army. However, they were also rational men. Even if they piled all their strength together, would they be capable of pulling off an attack as powerful as Calce's? Would they be able to survive an attack that contained the might of a miniature sun? Definitely not. That blinding sword that burned as bright as the sun would kill them instantly. They would die before even noticing what had happened. However, not only did the red dragon hatchling withstood the terrifying attack, it had even killed Calce in a single strike. Moreover, the soldiers had also sensed the sheer destructive power from the thunderous divine retribution that Max had unleashed in his lair earlier. This alone had convinced everyone to steer clear of him. Most of the soldiers' sanity were still intact, however, what other choice did they have? They were powerless against Max, and thus the only choice that remained for them was to flee. After all, everyone had seen Max being struck with a dragon-vanquishing bolt with their very own eyes. However, all that transpired was the sound of metal colliding against hard dragon scales, and nothing else. Max was completely unharmed. Everything was going according to Max's plan. Humans often thought of themselves as the smartest species. Even if their rationality had been corroded by fear, they would still subconsciously reiterate this opinion of theirs. They believed that their eyes would not lie to them. Thus, when Max had used his invincible golden body to intercept the terrifying dragon-vanquishing ballista bolt, the 100,000 soldiers had naturally assumed that humanity's greatest weapon had lost its effect against the dragons. After all, Max's skin had not been penetrated. However, was that truly the case? No, should any brave soul reattempt firing a dragon-vanquishing bolt at this moment, Max would undoubtedly be incapacitated, and he would immediately plummet onto the ground. However, in reality, none of the soldiers were willing to even try again, even though many had run right past it while fleeing. Moreover, as a result of Felix's mishap, 2 out of the 3 dragon vanquishing ballistae that they had brought to deal with Agatha had been lost within Max's lair. The aftermath of Max's thunderous divine retribution still remained in the lair, and as a result, any living creature that attempted to approach the lair would come into contact with the destructive will that was contained within the thunderous divine retribution. Although greatly weakened, the tiny electric currents that lingered in the air could easily kill humans with weak defenses. Naturally, not everyone had given up on the dragon-vanquishing ballista. In the distance, a familiar figure had already set his target on the remaining dragon-vanquishing ballista. Both of the person's limbs were mechanical contraptions. He was the dragon slayer, Bloom. What do we do, Felix? Should we prepare to flee? At this moment, the battlefield had undergone an earth-shattering change. A large number of deserters had caused the morale of the entire army to collapse. 1 deserter resulted in 10 more, and 10 deserters had spawned 100 more deserters. The effect was like a ripple that spread through the army's ranks, and before long, the movement was already too late to halt. Even at this moment, Galio and Felix, who were once the brains of the army and commanded everything, were powerless to salvage the situation. After all, in the face of death, most would lose all determination that they once held. Flee? What do you mean, flee? We are soldiers, Galio. Felix cursed Galio vehemently. He did not expect Galio to be the type of scum who would run away from a fight. Galio was momentarily stunned by Felix's reaction. However, soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and nodded. Indeed, Felix, you're right. Now that the continent has been unified by the old king, even if we try to escape, where can we even go to? Galio laughed bitterly. To be honest, I really hate you, Felix. But I'm sure that even you are aware that this dragon hatchling is no simple dragon. The fact that it can easily defeat that brat Calcis means that we are not to take it lightly. I'm such a fool. I should never have accepted the order to lead this crusade into this crummy desert in the first place. With such huge losses incurred, even if we were to return, I doubt that we would be let off lightly. Thus, we might as well go all out here. If we manage to somehow defeat this dragon hatchling, perhaps, the old king might forgive the losses we've incurred. At this moment, Galio reached into his satchel and brought out a pitch-black bottle. Despite the moonlight shining upon it, the black bottle did not produce any reflective glow whatsoever. It was like a black hole that sucked all light from its surroundings. This was Galio's most precious potion. However, due to the circumstances he was in, he had no choice but to use it. All right, cut the crap, time to give it our all. Intense flames appeared all across Felix's body. Following that, several magic arrays appeared behind him. Ripple Overdrive. Oath of Gold and Stone. Profound Protection. Casus Bonfire. Under the support of the 4 great magic arrays, Felix's muscles began to expand exaggeratedly. At the same time, countless elemental spirits in the air also rapidly gathered in Felix's direction. Felix's muscles, which had swelled to their limits, suddenly lit up. It was as if his essence, energy, and spirit had reached the pinnacle of his life. Galio, hold back that dragon for me. I'm confident that my strongest move will break through its defense. Upon hearing Felix's roar, Galio's eyes gradually darkened. He looked at the countless soldiers around him who were trying to escape, and a sinister smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Necromancy potion, 1,000,000 undead. Galio laughed out loud as he filled the bottle in his hand with immense mana. Suddenly, as if stimulated, the liquid in the bottle began to boil intensely. Restrain the dragon hatchling's movements. Upon saying this, the liquid in the bottle suddenly shot out and scattered into the air. The liquid immediately evaporated into the air, and then turned into grayish-black smoke. Countless soldiers who were escaping inhaled the black smoke from their mouths and noses. The next instant, they looked as if they had lost their minds. Their eyes turned white, and the veins on their bodies bulged. They trembled uncontrollably. A strange scene had enveloped the battlefield as thousands of soldiers began to contort uncontrollably. The black fog continued spreading, and the initial thousands of soldiers were only the first of its victims. This grayish-black fog was akin to a vicious virus. After infecting their initial host, they would then spread to their surrounding soldiers without any pause. In an instant, tens of thousands of soldiers had become the puppets of the black fog. Remember, there were only around 100,000 soldiers in the army. Countless soldiers watched as the terrifying black fog advanced towards them. However, unless they held their breath, they had no way of preventing themselves from sucking in the fog. The only thing that awaited them was death. However, that was not all that made the black fog a terrifying threat. Upon making contact with the soldiers that had died, the black fog would animate the deceased bodies and make them tremble violently. What is going on? Someone, tell us what is going on. Hurry up and run. Stay away from the black fog. They can devour a person's soul. Countless mournful wails sounded within the army. Felix was aware of the atrocity that Gallio had committed. However, in the face of the threat that Max had posed, nothing else mattered. Gallio, I have to say, you really are a savage. Felix snorted coldly. Yes, I hate you as much as you hate me, Felix. Your hypocritical integrity makes me feel disgusted. Gallio sneered. At this moment, the effects of the potion that had turned Gallio into a hairy beast had worn off. His body had returned to his original skinny appearance. Even so, however, Gallio's back was covered with countless fine black fog threads that made up a spiderweb-like pattern. If one were to observe carefully, they would notice that all those threads were connected to the soldiers that had been infected by the black fog. Moreover, so long as the threads were in contact with those soldiers, the soldiers would not fear pain or death. They would mindlessly do as Gallio commanded, and in this moment, it was to restrict Max's movement. With the situation being as it was, this was the best option that Gallio could come up with to accomplish his task. Felix did not blame Gallio. After all, in order to land his strongest attack on Max, he needed all the help he could get. The fiery fist, which contained all of his strength, was terrifyingly powerful. However, compared to Calcis' divine parting, it was not even half as strong. He was certain that it lacked the power to harm the unusually impervious red dragon hatchling. If he wanted to kill the other party, he would need to gamble with his own life. A dark light flashed in Felix's eyes. He gritted his teeth as blood flowed out of his mouth. The magic power in his body had been strengthened several times. However, this power had come at the expense of his own life force. Every second that passed would shave off Felix's lifespan. Nevertheless, at this hefty price, Felix had finally obtained the strength that he desired. Within a 3-kilometer radius, the temperature suddenly rose. In the air, countless rings of fire suddenly appeared. Then, like a domain, they enveloped the entire desert. The rings of fire existed within their own isolated dimension. Moreover, the temperature of the isolated dimension had already reached soaring heights. Although the soldiers who had been infected by the black fog were unaffected by the searing heat, Gallio, the master of the possessed soldiers, was drenched in sweat. He took a glance at Felix. However, upon noticing what he had done, a glint of shock flashed across his eyes. This guy is really a madman. He's burning his own life force to amplify his magic power. Does he intend of burning himself together with the dragon hatchling? Even if he's capable of instantly killing the dragon hatchling, by the time he's done, he probably won't live for much longer. Is this what he wants? Well, whatever, whether he lives or dies is of no consequence to me. If Felix dies here, then it would be for the best. After all, I would be able to claim all the fruits of victory for myself. Even if those fruits have come at a great cost. Max had already noticed Felix, who was accumulating mana, as well as the countless shrieking undead soldiers who were charging in a suicidal manner towards himself. Max was certain that he would come out relatively unharmed against these undead soldiers, however, doing so would greatly restrict his movement. Should I use the invincible golden body again? The morale of the human army was already at an all-time low. So long as he could withstand Felix and Gallio's attacks, he was certain that he could finally draw the curtains on this battle. However, his gut was warning him of an even greater danger hiding amongst the army. It was telling him to not use his invincible golden body plus at any cost, otherwise, his life would be in great peril. Max looked around the desert, but he could not discern the source of this great threat. Meanwhile, Mia, who was watching all of this in the sky, could feel her heart in her mouth. She had never seen Tahir use magic before, and thus, once she saw how powerful Felix's flaming ring magic was, it shocked her greatly. Faced against such immense power, could her brother, who had nowhere to hide, really survive? Yes. Definitely. Brother has already withstood the human contraption, and the Night's Light attack. No matter how powerful this fire spell was, I'm certain brother will definitely withstand it. In Mia's heart, Max had already become a synonym for omnipotence. She was extremely confident that her brother, Max, would be able to create a miracle once again. At the same time, for some unknown reason, the area around the luxurious carriage was unaffected by the situation developing on the battlefield. The soldiers around the carriage were completely unaffected by the black fog. With the carriage as the center, an area of about 100 meters was isolated from the black fog. It was as if it had existed in a different dimension. The soldiers around the carriage looked fearfully into the carriage. Even the generals of the army were unaware of the individual within the carriage, let alone the soldiers who were only assigned to guard the carriage. They were afraid of the black fog outside and the individual within the carriage. After all, they were not sure whether the individual within the carriage was even a human. For all even sure if the person in the carriage was a human, or some other existence. Back on the battlefield, chaos ensued. Fiery fist. Omnidirectional destruction. At this moment, Felix's voice resounded throughout the battlefield. This time, Max dared not neglect the powerful mana that Felix had unleashed. In the end, Max's personal attributes were only a dozen times that of a human. Even if his spell strength was far stronger than an ordinary person, and even twice that of his sister, Mia, who was extremely proficient in magic, it was useless unless he had enough mana to cast his spells. However, when Felix burned his life force, he was not simply amplifying his strength by a fixed multiplier. Instead, his strength had grown exponentially. Felix stacked layers upon layers of fiery fists, and each layer stacked was vastly stronger than the previous fist. The heat they emitted were so intense that the air itself seemed to have warped around the fiery fists. What a terrifying madman, Felix! Max's eyes narrowed slightly. He had been observing Felix for quite some time. Due to the isolated domain that was created by Fiery Fist, omnidirectional destruction, Max's escape route had been completely sealed off. Moreover, there were also countless suicidal undead soldiers charging at him, and this had greatly impeded Max's movements. Even though Max could strike down each soldier with a single swipe of his claw, due to their sheer numbers, Max was being gradually worn down. This made escaping, which was already a difficult feat to begin with, nigh impossible. Blood and flesh were splattered everywhere around Max. Countless severed heads were scattered around him, and at this point, even Max himself had lost count on how many he had killed. No, these undead soldiers could not be regarded as alive to begin with. They were merely Galio's puppets. Max had tried to use his dragon breath to attack Galio, but his blast was immediately blocked by hundreds of undead sandbags. As a result, Max had achieved nothing aside from squandering his own mana. Damn it, what should I do now? A hint of anxiety flashed in the depths of Max's eyes. Felix's new attack seemed to surpass even Calcis' divine parting. Max could not figure out any other way to survive the hit without using invincible golden body. So long as he was within the blast zone of the fiery fist, Max was certain that he would be immediately incapacitated, even if he managed to avoid the attack from striking his vital points. Suddenly, a thought seemed to have struck Max. His dragon eyes flashed with renewed vigor. Without an ounce of hesitation, Max's entire body burst forth with all his mana. He opened his mouth, and an intense dragon breath condensed around his fangs. Boom! The intense heat turned all the soldiers within a 10-meter radius of Max into charcoal. From this, Max had finally gotten a moment of relief. Roar! Max roared into the sky as if he was venting his anger. In the sky, Mia heard Max's roar and she was stunned. Her eyes were filled with confusion. Mia looked at Max, who was on the ground. Even though Mia and Max were siblings who had been with each other since birth, Mia still could not understand Max. She was utterly dumbfounded at Max's actions. Back on the ground, Max did not have much time to catch his breath. In less than 2 seconds, countless undead soldiers had once again pounced at Max like hungry beasts. Max was helpless. He did not have unlimited mana, and thus, he was once again entangled by the horde of undead soldiers. Back in the sky, Mia thought long and hard, and at long last, she finally made up her mind. What was the dragon hatchling trying to pull off earlier? Did my undead soldiers finally set it off? Galio frowned and thought in confusion. Ah, well, it would work in my favor if it's really the case. I hope it becomes so mad that it loses all rationality. The ones who are blinded by anger are the easiest to deal with. Felix, are you ready or not? How long do you intend on dilly-dallying? Aren't you burning your life force? How do you have this much life force left? Galio glanced impatiently at Felix, who was maniacally accumulating energy. Felix's pupils and whites had turned completely blood red. It was impossible to tell whether the redness was due to the fire element, or due to his blood aqueous barrier rupturing, causing blood to flood into his eyeball. As for his physical appearance, it was an extremely bloody sight. He was like a benevolent Buddha that was dyed in blood, ready to chant scriptures at any time to strike down the evil dragon in front of him. Rejoice, little dragon. You will die a painless death. At this moment, the world suddenly became silent. It was as if everyone had disappeared, and Felix had become the center of the world. Felix's voice did not come out from his mouth. The organs in his body had already been burned up by the terrifying flames. If he were to open his mouth, he would most likely spit out the burnt organs in his body. Instead, Felix's voice rang out from both the heavens and earth. It was very mystical. This was a skill that could only be used when one's spiritual power had reached a certain level. Felix, who had disregarded life and death, had already reached such a level by burning his own life. This was a level that even Max could not reach. The current Max was trapped in the domain that Fred had used. He was like a caged bird in a precarious situation. After all, the captive birds did not know when the butcher's knife would reach them. At this moment, Felix finally finished charging up his energy. A giant flaming snake appeared around Felix. Wherever the giant snake went, large amounts of water vapor would suddenly evaporate from the air. The air in the desert was extremely dry. As such, it made things worse. Many undead soldiers were instantly raised into ashes, and they were scattered into the air. Max could feel death coming for him. Rumble. Rumble. A powerful attack was coming directly at him. Max was certain that it had surpassed Calcis' divine parting. This was the strongest attack he had ever witnessed so far. Can I really take it on without the use of invincible golden body? Most definitely not. His physical body would undoubtedly suffer grievous wounds just from the aftershock of the attack, let alone a direct impact. Fiery fist, omnidirectional destruction. Felix's voice resounded throughout the domain. On the ground, a small crack suddenly appeared on Felix's forehead. Crack. The crack was not obvious, but it was widening rapidly. Crack. 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 Boom. An explosion rang out, and Felix's body had imploded. He was like a clay statue, there was not a single drop of blood left within his body. At this moment, above the desert, an incomparably huge fiery fist was condensing. The fist was at least 100 meters wide. It exuded an exceedingly dangerous aura. Galio was extremely shocked as he looked at the incomparably huge fist in the sky. He muttered to himself. It's this powerful. Is this the pinnacle of magic that we humans can unleash by sacrificing our life force? Felix could no longer hear anything. He had already exhausted his life force. At this moment he, who only had his spiritual power remaining, was drifting across the desert. A projection of Felix had appeared in the sky. However, Max could not spare the attention to look at the sight. After all, there was a terrifyingly huge fist that contained as much power as a nuclear warhead coming straight at him. Max's body felt extremely heavy. He was restrained by the undead soldiers and could not move. He watched helplessly as the terrifying fiery fist approached him. A trace of confusion flashed across his face. This man sacrificed his own life. Why did this lunatic go this far? Is eliminating me really that important? Max flapped his wings frantically in an attempt to break free from the suicidal attacks of the surrounding undead soldiers. However, even after using all his strength, another pile of undead soldiers would just pounce at him, holding him down once more. The huge fiery fist was in the sky, smashed down towards Max. It was as if a flaming python was coming at him, one that burned at over 1,000 degrees. 2,000 meters. 1,000 meters. 500 meters. Max's heart pounded with anxiety as the fist approached him. However, he was not the only one, as Galio was also similarly anxious. Should this terrifying attack, which contained all of Felix's life force, fail to slay Max, Felix would immediately hightail his way out of the battlefield. At this moment, aside from the undead soldiers roaming the desert, there was no other sound. Max flapped his wings. He did not want to be dragged down by the undead soldiers. He wanted to fight for a chance of survival, but there was no other way. He could only watch helplessly as he was dragged down by the undead soldiers. Roar! Max roared. In the sky. At this moment, a spell was being cast completely unnoticed. The fiery fist unleashed by Felix was exceptionally powerful, and thus, the spell that Mia was casting was completely undetectable. She opened her huge maw, and within it, immense mana was accumulating, waiting to be unleashed. Her fangs flashed with lightning as she proceeded onto the final stages of her attack. It was her lightning dragon breath. It was Mia's signature magic. Although her accuracy had much to be desired, she could at least fire in the right general direction. Upon hearing her brother's roar again, she finally understood. Her brother was signaling her to attack. The target of the attack was her brother, Max. Mia's confused expression previously was due to Max using the dragon tongue to communicate with her. He told her that, if he roared again, she would have to use her strongest spell to attack him. Although Mia did not understand her brother's reasoning, she still did it without hesitation. After all, her life was given to her by Max, and thus, she would follow his orders to the letter. A terrifying spell condensed within her mouth, and following this, a ray of lightning dragon breath descended from the sky. Although the huge fist in the sky was powerful, its speed was still not as fast as Mia's. Mia's dragon breath took the lead, surpassing the fist, and striking the ground beside Max. Max flapped his wings and pounced to his side. With the assistance of the impact caused from Mia's blast, he was able to put at least 100 meters of distance from his original spot. By abusing the impact of Mia's attack, he had managed to avoid the fiery fist, omnidirectional destruction's initial blast zone. However, it seemed that the fiery fist had a will of its own. The fist gradually changed direction, and once again it was headed towards Max. You can do that. A vicious glint flashed in Max's eyes. Without paying heed to anything else, he immediately started burrowing into the ground. Burrowing was the specialty of the red dragons. Unlike its usual purpose to hunt prey, however, Max was relying on it to save his own life. Boom! An incomparably huge explosion suddenly rocked the ground, flinging debris and dust into the air. Wave after wave of terrifying shock waves quaked the entire desert. The undead soldiers that had been controlled by Galio were sent flying. They were torn into pieces of minced meat, and it was an extremely gruesome sight. The shockwaves had even caused Galio to hurriedly retreat a few steps. He hurriedly consumed the potion to transform his body into the beastly appearance once more. He quickly ran into the distance, afraid that he would be affected by Felix's frightening spell. The moonlight from the night sky had been completely obscured. Only sand had existed for as far as the eye can see. No one knew whether Max, who was the target of the monstrous ability, was still alive. Even Mia, who was watching from the sky, had a trace of worry flash across her eyes. Could brother really survive this? Mia pursed her lips. She firmly believed that her brother would definitely be able to create a miracle and survive. Didn't he also survive the terrifying light attack from before as well? That was a terrifying attack that Mia dared not even imagine. The attack was so dazzling that it hurt her eyes just looking at it. Although this flaming fist looks extremely powerful, it should only be slightly stronger than the spell cast by the night earlier. Brother should be able to handle it, right? However, Galio was of the opposite opinion. Behind him, there were still waves of terrifying explosions and shockwaves erupting. Galio's eardrums were slightly bleeding from the shock, and he was less than 500 meters away from Max. Technically speaking, it could be said that he was at the epicenter of the attack. Although he immediately took a potion and quickly moved 2 kilometers away from the center, the initial impact alone had caused Galio's eardrums to rupture. A trail of blood descended down his ear like a small snake. He turned his head around in fear, and a trace of terror flashed in his eyes. How could this damn fiery fist be so powerful? Had he not immediately consumed the body-strengthening potion, he might have been bombarded until there was not a single trace of him left. With this much power, the dragon hatchling is undoubtedly dead. The terrifying explosions had lasted for more than 10 minutes. As a result of those explosions, a huge crater had formed in the desert. It was 100 meters wide, and it was seemingly bottomless. It was hard to determine how much damage Felix had caused just by eyeballing it. Mia, who was in the sky, was shocked at what she saw. Could her brother really survive such a terrifying spell? Her conviction wavered as doubt began to settle in. She was afraid that even her mother, Agatha, would not be able to withstand such a powerful attack. The power contained within the attack had already surpassed that of the dragon vanquishing bolt. It was on a completely different tier. Mia was not present during Max's battle against Tahir. However, if she was present back then, she would have noticed it. Felix, who was only platinum rank, had managed to cast a spell that rivaled that of Tahir's, who was a diamond rank individual. Such power was truly shocking. After completely unleashing this move, Felix's spiritual power in the sky slowly dissipated. The domain-like ability that enveloped the desert had also worn off. It seemed that Felix had finally died. However, after the grand feat that he had displayed, it was likely that his name would be passed for the eons to come. An hour later, the dust and sand in the sky, as well as the bloody broken limbs of the undead, had finally dispersed. A small dirt mound suddenly appeared from the desert. Then, the small dirt mound suddenly broke open. Max's head emerged from the dirt mound. With a flap of his wings, he burst out of the sand. Although he was in a sorry state, and the scales on his body were burnt, fortunately for him, he did not receive any fatal damage. Galio had instantly noticed Max's presence. Despite taking on such a terrifying attack from Felix, Max had only received minor injuries. He could not help but shout in terror in his heart as he hurriedly disappeared into the horizon. Thus, all that remained of the 100,000-strong army was only a dozen or so soldiers. These dozen or so people were those within the domain of the luxurious carriage, and as a result, they had managed to avoid death by a hair's breadth. It was unknown what kind of domain-type magic was cast around this carriage, but it was completely unaffected by the events that had transpired. Despite the massive impact of the fiery fist, omnidirectional destruction, it was as if nothing had happened in the area around the carriage. The soldiers in the domain were all trembling at this moment, as they stared at Max with great fear in their eyes. His figure was like a nightmare that had been deeply imprinted in their souls. "Sir, sir! Please save us. We are definitely no match for this dragon. You must need a servant, yes. Otherwise, who would pull your luxurious carriage? Sir, I beg you. You must save us. Otherwise, the old king will definitely be humiliated. Fear seeped into the soldier's veins as Max turned his head to look at them. They hurriedly turned to the carriage for help. However, the mysterious individual within the carriage did not seem to care about the soldiers. Slash. The space around them shook violently, and the eyes of the dozen or so soldiers were filled with shock. Their heads and bodies were separated without a trace of blood. There was a look of disbelief in their eyes. Max did not actually notice the dozen or so soldiers. After all, he could not care less about them. Instead, he was looking in Galio's direction. After all, the mysterious black fog that turned the human army into undead had caused him great trouble earlier. Max almost was killed by Felix's life-consuming spell due to Galio's obstruction. Thus, now that he had survived said spell, he wanted to take revenge on Galio. Upon noticing that her brother was fine, Mia's eyes were filled with uncontrollable excitement. She clapped her hands with an overjoyed expression. On the ground, Max suddenly flapped his huge wings. He turned into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the direction of Galio, who was escaping in the distance. Due to the effects of the potion, Galio's speed had vastly increased. Within just moments, Galio had already fled 5 kilometers away. Even a horse was no match for Galio. However, in Max's eyes, all humans were just as slow. It would only take a minute for Max to catch up to him. Galio felt the terrifying howling of a hurricane behind him. It was the sound of the air being compressed. Galio subconsciously looked back. To his terror, Max, who was originally just a small dot, was rapidly zooming towards him. Galio's eyes narrowed, and his pupils became the size of pinholes. He continued to run in a panic, but he had nowhere to hide in. After all, his current direction was completely opposite of Deer Heart villages. The further Galio ran, the more likely he was to die. Max's voice had already arrived behind him. He opened his mouth and let out a deafening, terrifying dragon roar. Galio knew that he had no way out. Thus, he stopped and revealed a vicious expression on his face. Little dragon, you are indeed the weirdest dragon I have ever encountered. The black fog earlier was a group attack. However, have you ever faced off against a cornered alchemist's counterattack before? The expression on Galio's face gradually changed into a ferocious one. He laughed and took out something that looked like a gemstone from his pocket. Then he shattered it to reveal a golden bottle within it. Watch carefully, this is my real ability. Galio uncorked the bottle as he spoke. Then, he drank up the viscous liquid within it in a single gulp. His hair slowly turned golden, just like Calcis. At the same time, a drop of crimson-red blood rose from his right palm. This is the blood that Felix gave me before he died, condensed from his lifetime of strength. This is the essence of all essences. And on this hand, I have a potion which contains Calcis essence. It can give me the same power as Calcis for a short period of time. Little dragon, are you curious to see what will happen when I consume both Calcis and Felix's essences at the same time? Galio laughed maniacally. Felix's droplet of blood burned brightly in Galio's hand. To a random observer, it looked no different from a flame. Within it was Felix's strength when he was consuming his own life force. An extremely complicated magic array appeared in Galio's hand. Following this, the droplet of blood began to bubble, and it soon turned into a pill the size of a thumb. The expression on Galio's face turned even more manic. On his left hand was the golden potion containing Calcis essence, while on his right was the newly completed pill made of Felix's essence. Naturally, Max would not just stand idly by as Galio consumed the potion and pill. The best outcome for him was to kill Galio before he made any moves, after all. However, Galio's figure blurred at this moment. Waves of black smoke had sprouted behind him to form the shape of wings. He had gained 2 huge wings that were about 5 meters long. Galio had followed Felix's footsteps, as he was forced to consume his own life force to deal with Max. As a result, Galio's attack, spell strength, speed, and all other attributes were greatly enhanced. It was no exaggeration to say that the current Galio was a completely different individual from the one just moments ago. The current Galio's attributes were comparable to Felix's, prior to him sacrificing his life force. Although it was still rather weak compared to Calcis and Felix at their prime, it was good enough to allow him to dodge Max's claw. After dodging Max's attack, Galio snorted coldly. Max did not hold back at all. He immediately lunged at Galio, giving him no time to rest. He aimed at Galio's vital organs. The claw strike earlier was aimed at Galio's heart. Galio snickered loudly. The black wings on his back suddenly fluttered. The gust of winds it produced were in no way weaker than Max's. Max frowned upon this sight. Thus, he gathered lightning in his mouth and fired a lightning dragon breath in Galio's direction. Boom! However, it was to no avail. Galio, who was burning through his own life force, could not be underestimated. Clang! Max's dragon breath had landed onto Galio's wings, but to Max's surprise, a metallic sound had rung out upon making contact. You're overestimating yourself if you think that you can stop me from consuming the drugs. Galio looked at the potion in his hand and sneered. Gulp. Galio swallowed the potion and pill at the same time while smirking at Max. Suddenly, Galio's aura surged once more. The power was so great that it had caused a pained expression to appear across his face. Two huge magic arrays suddenly appeared behind him. One of them was a complicated golden magic array that contained an intense light attribute. The other was an incomparably violent fiery red magic array. The powerful fire attribute magic within it was ready to be unleashed. At this moment, Galio's skin began to peel off due to the effect of the flames. Replacing the peeled skin, however, were dense red energy lines. Galio's originally black hair had turned into a mixture of golden and scarlet. He suddenly coughed and spat out a large amount of blood. Galio looked at his hands, his eyes filled with joy. This was the first time he had experienced such great power. The power brought Galio an incomparable sense of fulfillment. Max let out a long breath. He did not expect the three human generals to be easy prey to begin with. Could this be the dangerous enemy that I've been saving my remaining invincible golden bodies for? No, that can't be right. Max subconsciously denied the thoughts in his heart. Although Galio had swallowed 2 concoctions and obtained great power, even so, he did not give off a great sense of danger. Those who could truly threaten Max were all terrifying existences. Take Tahir for example. Had he not possessed the powerful cheat, which was the battle of existence, he would probably have died in the battle against Tahir. Max no longer thought about it. He looked at Galio, whose strength had soared, and roared. His launched a claw strike in Galio's direction. The claws were huge, and a loud whistle could be heard as it scraped the air. At this moment, Max's attack was strong enough to smash an elephant. Bang! Despite this, Galio had managed to block Max's attack with a single hand. Max was shocked. Although their physical bodies were very strong, even Calcis and Felix did not dare to take his attack head-on. Little dragon, I can feel power coursing through my veins, Galio stated in a sinister manner. Following which, the 2 huge wings on his back suddenly flapped. A powerful hurricane launched Galio into the air. Toxic fiery fist. A dark purple flame suddenly lit up on Galio's right hand. Its shape was similar to the fiery feast that Felix used. The dark purple flame was like a venomous snake that corroded everything with its venom. System, bring up Galio's stats. Ding dong. Display stats. Name, Galio. Race, human, mutant. Current rank, platinum 99%. Age, 50. Maximum lifespan, 88. Attack, 43, normal human 12. Spell strength, 435, normal human 3. Defense, 63, normal human 5. Speed, 41, normal human 8. Magic, Fiery Fist, Imitation, Holy Cross Light Shield, Imitation. Remarks, Alchemy Master Galio has consumed a mysterious concoction. He is currently consuming his life force. It is unwise to fight him. Max frowned. He looked at the upper right corner of the system interface, which contained his own attributes. True name, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current rank, Hatchling. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 12,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 31, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 15. Spell Strength, 505, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 25. Defense, 20, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 10. Speed, 29, Normal Red Dragon Hatchling 13. Spells, Invincible Golden Body Plus, Lightning Arrow Rain, Thunderstorm, Lightning Paralysis, Thunderclap, Light Affinity, Lightning Immunity, Thunderous Divine Retribution, 10 million volts of thunder. Abilities, Bite, Claw Strike, Stomp, Tail Swipe. Breath, Lightning, Strong Acid. Remarks, even with these cheats, fighting against Galio in your current state is not a wise choice. Right now, other than his spell strength, Galio had surpassed Max in all his attributes. Boom. The incomparably powerful dark purple fiery fists had caused Max to retreat time and time again. Galio's attacks became more and more ferocious, and a hint of madness flashed in the depths of his eyes. Ha 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 ha. Little dragon, where has all of your haughtiness gone to? Weren't you acting all high and mighty just a moment ago? Why can't you retaliate a single one of my attacks? While dodging Galio's attacks, Max racked his brain to come up with an idea to deal with Galio. However, none of his ideas seemed particularly effective. Moreover, Max's sixth sense was also telling him if were to use the invincible golden body to deal with Galio, he would definitely regret it, as there was an even greater threat looming at the corner. He was unsure whether he would be able to deal with the incoming threat even with the help of the battle of existence. The situation was starting to look rather bleak for Max. Galio's fiery fist was not an ordinary fiery fist. Max was certain that he would be gravely wounded if he were to come into contact with it. Should that ever happen, he might as well be a fish waiting to be sliced up on Galio's chopping board. The human army that came after me is almost fully wiped out. All I need to do now is to ensure my own safety, and with that, I'll finally be able to rest. After all, the human army has suffered heavy losses in this battle. Once this is over, it's likely that I'll enjoy peace and quiet for several years. While these thoughts went on in his mind, Max was continuously dodging Galio's attacks. However, his form was deteriorating by the second. All of a sudden, Max opened his gaping maw and unleashed a ray of lightning. Boom! It was his dragon breath. Although it was a rather weak blast, it had done its job, which was to temporarily delay Galio's movements. Immediately after, Max's wings flapped rapidly, and he soared into the sky. Although Max did not know what kind of ability or spell the humans had used to increase their strength by burning through their own life force. After careful observation, Max discovered that once the ability W is activated, they were unable to stop. In other words, the boost in strength was like an hourglass. Each moment that passed was a moment closer to death. Once the sand within the hourglass had completely trickled away, all that awaited them was death. Upon realizing this, Max decided to flee. Dignity of dragons? Screw that. I'm a transmigrator, these rules don't apply to me. Although Galio's speed had surpassed Max's due to his boost in strength, after being momentarily obstructed by Max's dragon breath, there was now a great distance between the two of them. Galio's eyes burned with fury once he realized that Max had fled. Little dragon. Where are you running to? I'm already consuming my own life force. By hook or by crook, I will drag you down with me. Galio roared loudly. The enormous wings formed by the black fog on his back directly propelled him forward. After which, he gave chase in the direction where Max had escaped to. Galio had used his full speed, and as a result, the distance between him and Max was actually rapidly closing. This meant that Galio's speed had far surpassed Max's. Max could feel the wind whistling past his ears. He did not choose to regroup with Mia. Although Mia's combat capabilities were still intact, her poor physique and inaccuracy of spell casting would undoubtedly slow Max down. Max could not guarantee that Galio would not use Mia as a hostage. Thus the distance between Max and Mia quickly widened. Mia, who was hiding in the clouds, watched as Max's figure disappeared into the distance. A deep worry flashed across her eyes. On the ground, a hidden figure had already noticed Mia's presence in the sky. The person's chin was covered in stubbles, and he looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was carrying a huge bag with many weapons within it. The middle-aged man's right hand, which was hidden under his clothes, was so huge that it looked way out of proportion. "There's a dragon hatchling hiding in the sky, eh?" The man was Bloom, the dragon slayer. Although the countless broken limbs scattered across the desert had given him a surprise, he did not take it to heart. He had only a single goal in mind, which was to slay dragons. Strange, why couldn't I detect the presence of Agatha, or the mysterious dragon that killed the three heroes? Bloom touched his stubble, and a ridiculous idea appeared in his mind. The mother of the two young dragons, Agatha, has acknowledged the two dragon hatchlings' abilities to fend for themselves, and has left the lair. If Max were present and he could read minds, he would be greatly shocked. After all, Bloom's hypothesis had hit the mark. Normally, red dragons would take care of their children until they were around 10 years old, and had the ability to survive on their own. Only then would they choose to leave the cave and separate themselves from their children. This was how the dragons operated. However, there were exceptions. If their child was gifted and had the ability to survive at a young age, the mother dragon would not hesitate to leave her children behind early on. Despite all the bullying that the two dragon hatchlings had received, Agatha had yet to appear. If he could take a guess, he dare say that Agatha had already died. After all, red dragons, who were extremely sensitive to magic, would definitely be able to sense such a terrifying battle. With so many shocking spells unleashed, even if Agatha was at the edge of the desert, she would be able to detect the burst of mana and immediately return to her lair. However, Bloom was also very impressed by the troops. After all, they dared to attack the dragon hatchling before Agatha had even showed herself. While it was fine if they could take care of the dragon hatchlings quickly, should the battle extend for too long, and if Agatha had returned, all the soldiers would most likely perish. However, Bloom had forgotten one important fact. With a select few exceptions, Bloom's knowledge of dragons had surpassed everyone else's. Mia suddenly felt a chill. It was as if she had been targeted by a poisonous snake, and she felt as if the temperature around her had dropped to 0 degrees. Mia hurriedly looked around, but even from her bird's-eye view from the sky, she could not find any sign of humans. As a result of Galio's lethal black fog, none of the soldiers had survived, and all Mia could see was dead bodies littered everywhere. Other than gusts of wind mixed with the aura of death within them, Mia could not find anything else. Right as Mia had let her guard down after assuming that she was hallucinating, a blazingly fast ballista bolt shot at her. Whoosh! The bolt was pitch black and razor sharp. The arrow pierced through Mia's dragon scales, and it had ruthlessly left a bloody trail on her body. Mia's body was very frail. Without Max's protection, the chances of her surviving to adulthood were very low. It was at this moment that Mia finally reacted. The bolt that was launched at her was an inferior version of the dragon vanquishing bolt. The inferior version consisted of inferior materials, and thus its strength was greatly reduced. Had it not been for Mia's weak body and her weak dragon scales, the inferior version would not have harmed her in the first place. Mia was shocked. She looked around in fear. However, there was still no signs of movement around her. "An enemy is here. They've discovered my location." Mia was terrified. She wanted nothing more than to flee the scene. However, the instructions Max had given her earlier still rang clearly in her mind. Unless the situation is urgent, do not leave your hiding spot. Of course, if Max was beside Mia at this moment, he would definitely tell her to flee. However, Mia did not share the same opinion. After all, she worried that if she fled, she would be surrounded by enemies, or she might even fall into a trap. Worse still, she might even be separated from Max. Mia widened her eyes in an attempt to locate her attacker. However, even after pushing her magic perception to the max, she could not sense anything in her surroundings. Mia started to get nervous. She looked around in panic, and she felt as if her heart was stuck in her throat. Although Max could ignore the previous bolt and remain unscathed, Mia would be severely injured if hit. The enemy was hidden in the dark. Not knowing where her enemy would strike had terrified her. Mia's enemy was obviously very patient. They were in no hurry to deal with Mia. After all, they were not even worried that she would escape. It was as if Mia was dancing on the palm of their hand. In the desert, under the glow of the moonlight, a faint reflective crystal glinted. It was from Bloom's Ballista 1, who was currently hiding underneath the sand. Through the bolt he had fired earlier, he had gained a grasp of Mia's defensive ability. He adjusted the next inferior dragon vanquishing bolt, and began calculating the angle and air resistance. He planned to kill Mia with a single shot. Bloom had picked up a completely unused dragon vanquishing bolt from the remaining dragon vanquishing ballista. Via the cannon he had prepared, Bloom would be able to unleash a powerful dragon vanquishing bolt at close range. However, upon firing, there was a high probability that his cannon would be damaged due to the inferior materials he used to create it. He still needed to save the cannon to use his Dragon Annihilation missile. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, Bloom did not want to waste the dragon vanquishing bolt. Through various calculations, Bloom had already determined Mia's defensive ability. To give an analogy, Mia was like a tiger. Although she had a certain amount of firepower, in front of absolute power, her defense was no different from a thin piece of paper. Air resistance accounted for, deviation of trajectory has also been calibrated. Bloom opened one of his eyes and said slowly. He had already locked onto Mia with the crossbow in his hand. Mia seemed to have a sixth sense. Her huge body suddenly trembled. She looked behind her, and to her surprise, there was something coming at her from the ground. It was traveling at breakneck speed, and it would not be long before it would reach her. Although shocked, Mia hurriedly flapped her wings to dodge. However, as she was rather weak when it came to combat, her wings were still pierced by the bolt, even though she had seen the shot clearly. Slash! A small hole of about 3 centimeters appeared on her wings. Fresh blood continuously flowed out from it. Roar! Mia cried out in pain, and hurriedly prepared to dodge. However, the next inferior dragon vanquishing bolt had already arrived. The inferior version of the dragon vanquishing bolt was made out of metal. Although its firepower was lacking compared to the actual dragon vanquishing bolt, it was still a powerful weapon capable of inflicting great damage to large beasts. Naturally, dragon hatchlings had fallen under this category as well. Had it not been for the adult black dragon's abilities that Max had consumed, the inferior dragon vanquishing bolt would give him quite a bit of trouble as well. Whoosh! Another terrifying bolt was shot out. In the dim darkness, it was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. This time, the target of the arrow was surprisingly Mia's neck. Should this bolt hit Mia's neck, she would immediately lose the ability to breathe. In other words, she would die. Even if Mia wanted to escape, or if Max wanted to come back and save Mia, it would be too late. Mia saw the ice-cold bolt rapidly magnifying in her vision, and could not help but shiver. The memories she had inherited had instinctually caused her to release her lightning dragon breath at the bolt. This was a subconscious reaction, and even Mia herself was not aware of what she had done. Roar! Boom! The lightning dragon breath struck the inferior dragon vanquishing bolt, causing the bolt to shatter, and allowing Mia to narrowly escape death. It was at this moment that Mia had discovered Bloom's hiding spot. In response, she glared at him and let loose a ferocious roar. "You are quite formidable. To think that you've discovered my position." Bloom crawled up from the sand and patted the sand off his body. His mechanical right arm flickered with an intense light. In the dark night, it was as bright as the stars. It actually says crossbow, but I'm not sure how he'll fire a ballista bolt from a crossbow." The wind constantly whistled past Max's ears. Max had already raised his speed to the absolute limit. At this moment, he was like a meteorite that moved rapidly towards the distant horizon. Behind him, a cold and evil aura was following closely behind. The incomparably powerful aura had belonged to Galio. At this moment, Galio was burning through his life force, and he had consumed two powerful concoctions which contained the essence of Calcis and Felix. Although it was at a heavy price, the current Galio had far surpassed Max in terms of stats. As for why Max was fleeing, it was because he was aware that he was no match for the current Galio. There was a limit to the amount of time one could burn one's own life. Max only needed to escape from Galio until he had fully consumed his own life. However, Galio was extremely fast. With the help of the two powerful wings made from the black fog behind him, his speed far surpassed Max's. The distance between Max and Galio was originally around 2 kilometers. However, in less than 30 seconds, there was only a kilometer left. Max turned his head, and he was shocked by what he saw. How can he be this fast? If this continues, he's going to catch up to me. It's only a matter of time. Although Max was not greatly wounded, he had little desire to fight against the now powerful Galio. Galio was originally just an alchemist. Thus, although he had Calcis' powerful light and sword magic, as well as Felix's fire magic, he was like a giant with great strength, but was too clumsy to properly utilize it. Despite this, even a casual use of his skills would achieve terrifying effects. Max could only use the invincible golden body plus one more time, but it would only last for a single attack. Max dared not bet on how long he could survive against Galio without using invincible golden body. Max racked his brain to come up with a way to avoid fighting Galio head-on while stalling for as much time as possible. Behind him, Galio was quickly approaching him. 1,000 meters. 900 meters. 800 meters. 500 meters. 300 meters. The distance between them was rapidly closing. Upon realizing that he was about to catch up to Max, Galio's eyes flashed with a hint of madness. "Little dragon, time to die." However, at this moment, Max's body suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Subsequently, a powerful magic immediately engulfed Max's huge body. The next instant, Max's speed had picked up once again. Moreover, it was an explosive increase in speed. The distance between Galio and Max had once again widened. Galio, who originally thought that Max's fate was sealed, could not help but be exasperated. What Max had used to increase his speed was actually the magical acceleration that Mia had used previously. After devouring Tahir's abilities, Max suddenly comprehended the acceleration spell at this moment. As a result of his 500 points of spell strength, Max's flight speed had reached a whole new tier. This had given him a slight edge over Galio. Galio could feel Max's body getting further and further away from him, and at this instant, he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Damn it! How is this possible? I was clearly about to catch up to him. Could this little dragon have been toying with me before? I don't believe it, I don't believe it. Such a strange little dragon, where did it come from? Could this dragon have inherited its mother's blood and gained the talent of an ancient dragon? Galio roared. He was unwilling to accept this fact. At this moment, so long as Max had no desire to fight Galio, then no matter how much effort Galio put in, he would never be able to catch up to Max. Moreover, Galio was consuming his own life force. He could feel his body weaker and weaker, and through this, he knew that he did not have much time left. After pulling away another 3 kilometers from Galio, Max finally took a breather and looked back at Galio. Galio was no longer pursuing Max. Instead, he was glaring at Max from afar. Then, he laughed. Boom! A huge explosion suddenly rocked the sky. A huge mushroom cloud with a diameter of more than 50 meters directly burst out from the sky. The mushroom cloud was filled with grayish-black gas and emitted a disgusting stench. Seeing that he could not catch up to Max, and that he was near the end of his life, Galio refused to continue being humiliated and chose to self-destruct. Max looked at the grayish-black smoke from the explosion and remained silent. Why are these humans willing to go this far just to kill me? Shouldn't they have fled once they realized my superiority over them? Max did not understand, nor did he want to understand. Now that he had dealt with Galio, he let out a long sigh and prepared to return to Mia's location. However, he suddenly frowned. He could not sense Mia's presence. Where did Mia go? Didn't I tell her to sit still in the clouds? Could she be in danger? Worry began to seep into Max's thoughts. The human army has already been wiped out. If Mia was really in danger, who was the one attacking her? No matter how he thought about it, he could not figure it out. However, at this moment, an extremely luxurious carriage appeared in Max's mind. Why would such a luxurious carriage, which seemed to be on vacation, appear in the human army? Moreover, based on what he could recall, the carriage did not suffer any damage during the battle. It was not even affected in the slightest. Max gasped. Something's amiss. Max, who did not have much time to think, immediately unleashed his mana, activated his magical acceleration, and flew towards the clouds where Mia was originally. Back to 15 minutes ago. When Max was still fleeing from Galio's clutches. After blasting Bloom's inferior dragon vanquishing bolt out of midair, Bloom, who had already left his hiding spot, met her gaze. Bloom was carrying a huge cannon on his back, and he was wearing an ordinary vest. His modified mechanical arm emitted a dazzling light. It shone like a star. Mia did not know what was driving the mechanical arm, but she did not feel any mana coming off of it. However, Mia felt a great sense of danger from it. The power of this thing is terrifying. Mia took in a breath of cold air and stared at Bloom's mechanical right arm. Bloom smiled faintly. She knew that the little dragon hatchling before him was sizing up his mechanical arm. However, he was not kind enough as to properly introduce his ability to the prey that he was about to slaughter. The mechanical arm was personally made for him by the person who saved his life. Bloom, who was originally just an ordinary person, could easily exert force of over several thousand newtons with the support of his mechanical arm. They were powered by the shell of a strange creature that lived underground, the crystal scorpions. These crystal scorpions were an extremely long-lived creature that had existed since ancient times. There was almost no description of them in the long river of history. However, Bloom knew that the creature's strength was extraordinary. They were the size of a castle, and their shell was enveloped with a dense layer of energy. The shell that drove his mechanical arm was only half the size of a fist. However, Bloom knew that this was only a small part of the extremely large crystal scorpion. As a result, at one point, Bloom had diverted some of his enthusiasm towards slaying dragons into researching the crystal scorpions instead. No one knew why Bloom had vanished at one point. The rumor that was spread among the people was that Bloom had encountered an extremely powerful ancient dragon, and he had fallen to it. In truth, however, Bloom had encountered a crystal scorpion that had been hibernating for over thousands of years. That particular scorpion was capable of destroying the world with just one breath. It was also because Bloom had gotten too close to it that he had lost his arm. Bloom made no unnecessary movements as he launched his attack at Mia. Mia's lack of knowledge regarding him was his greatest weapon. Bloom smashed his fist into the ground. The huge recoil caused Bloom's body to soar into the sky, and his figure was heading directly towards Mia. Mia was startled. She hurriedly planned to use her magic to counterattack. However, before she could even condense lightning in her mouth, Bloom's iron fist had already slammed into her. Boom! A heavy iron fist slammed into Mia's snout. Mia's casting process was halted, and she cried out in pain. She waved her claws randomly in an attempt to scratch Bloom. However, Bloom had already seen through Mia's attack. He easily lowered his body, dodged Mia's attack, and threw another fist at Mia's feet. Crack! In an instant, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Mia's entire body trembled. She fell to the ground and writhed non-stop. Bloom, who had a wealth of experience slaying dragons, did not have much trouble dealing with Mia, who was completely unfamiliar to fighting. Bloom's moves were very simple, but they were also effective. No extraneous movement was contained in his attacks. Less than a minute had passed since Mia's discovery of Bloom and her defeat. Terrifying efficiency would probably shock even the three heroes if they were still alive. Bloom took out a rope from his waist. This was a rope soaked in a special material. Even if an ordinary ferocious beast were to go all out, it would be difficult for them to break free. Mia had already lost her ability to fight. Thus, using the rope to tie her up was perfectly fine. In order to prevent any accidents from happening, Bloom shattered the bones within Mia's wings. Roar! Mia cried out in pain. A hint of confusion flashed across her eyes. Am I really that weak? The person who had defeated her was not even a mage. He had merely used a mechanical arm that could use strange powers to easily deal with her. On the other hand, her brother had only been born a little earlier than her, and yet, he was able to withstand 100,000 human troops and even kill them all. I truly am a weakling. Surely, my presence here is only a burden to my brother. As expected, I'm better off dead. Should Max come into harm's way because of her, Mia would never forgive herself. Once she was gone, Max would no longer have to worry about protecting her. Mother must have left us because I was too weak. A deep despair flashed in Mia's eyes. She did not want to live in this world anymore. She despised herself. Why was I born so weak? Why must I be protected to survive in this cruel world? Why was I born a red dragon instead of a black dragon? In the end, Mia had given up thinking. She no longer cared. She knew that she was about to be executed by the human, and her body parts would be fetched for a high price. However, Bloom had other plans. He had not seen Max's figure yet. He had observed the two hatchlings for a very long time, and he had already grasped most of their habits. Bloom was 80% sure that should Max realize that he had kidnapped Mia, he would definitely come to rescue her. With that, his operation could finally begin. Bloom turned his head to look at Mia, who was on the verge of death, and a hint of excitement flashed across his eyes. When I checked the Ross of the previous chapters, both of his arms should be mechanical. Either the author has changed his details, or Bloom has not revealed his second mechanical arm yet. Max flew at breakneck speeds. The surrounding scenery flashed past him like lightning. In less than 2 minutes, Max had already arrived at Mia's original location. At this moment, there was nothing but the smell of corpses coming from the countless dead soldiers on the ground. Max slowly closed his eyes and felt the subtle fluctuations of mana around him. He did not believe that his sister would disappear into thin air. After all, the red dragons were the dragons that excelled the most in magic. Thus, even if they died, some mana would still linger within their corpses. Max was confident that even if his sister was transported to any corner of the desert, he would still be able to locate her. Max slowly searched the ground. Other than the human corpses, Max could not find anything else. Even the luxurious carriage that Max had spotted before had disappeared. Could my sister's disappearance be related to the mysterious carriage? Max frowned. That would be troublesome. He did not have any magic that could transform him into a human. Moreover, with his huge body, he would be attacked by humans wherever he went. It was impossible for him to enter the human world to learn more about the mysterious carriage. What should I do? While Max was feeling distressed, he suddenly caught a whiff of his sister's scent. However, Max could not sense any mana fluctuations in the direction of the scent. Could Mia be dead? Max could not help but think about the worst possible outcome. The other party might have disintegrated Mia's body and released her scent as bait. Max frowned, but he could not afford to hesitate. Thus, he immediately rushed in the direction of the scent. Max had been very caring towards his younger brothers and sisters in his previous life. Thus, he did not want Mia to suffer any harm. So long as there was a probability that Mia was still alive, Max would do his best to save her. Mia's scent was not far away. In less than half a minute, Max had arrived at the spot where her scent was emitted from. However, the moment Max entered the place where Mia's scent was, his pupils suddenly shrank. His instincts told him that he had entered a domain that was similar to a magic barrier. Max turned his head and looked at the air behind him. He lightly touched it with his dragon claw. Sizzle! Max's mana imploded, and as a result, he injured his own claw. The scales on his claw were slightly chipped, and some blood had flowed out. Max was shocked. He was actually injured. What is this magic barrier? Could it be a domain-type ability like the fiery domain Felix had used? However, at this moment, Max did not have time to ponder on the domain. His priority was to locate his sister, Mia's position. Max quickly noticed that there was something that looked like a small mound in the desert. Mia's aura had surprisingly come from within. Max did not hesitate and went forward to check. Upon gently pushing aside the gravel, Max spotted Mia, who had been tied up and had many of her bones broken. She had been severely injured. Mia's eyes were dull, and her body was trembling non-stop. However, it seemed that due to Max's arrival, his scent had caused Mia to slowly regain her senses. The moment Mia noticed Max, she suddenly quivered. "Brother! Run! This is a trap!" Upon hearing Mia's words, Max's heart sank. As expected, this is a trap. The rope that's used to tie Mia's body is most likely a magic item that conceals one's mana. Thus, by only revealing her scent, the enemy has tricked me into thinking that she had died, and I would have rushed here without checking for any surrounding traps. Beep. 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 An ear-piercing sound suddenly came from beside Max and Mia. On the ground, there were 50 to 60 barrels of explosives activated. Moreover, not far from Mia, who was tied up, there was a 2 to 3 meter long barrel of explosives inserted into Mia's wound. It was surrounded by spikes made from dragon parts. These spikes were smeared with plenty of dark purple poison. This was clearly a weapon that was specifically made to target him, and it was similar to a shrapnel grenade. As long as the explosive was detonated, these terrifying spikes would be instantly sent flying by the powerful shock wave and pierce into his body. Max cried out in his heart. Who on earth am I dealing with? Are they a remnant of the human army? If that was the case, why didn't I notice such an entity in my previous battle? Could it be someone from the luxurious carriage? The barrel of explosives that was filled with spikes was about to explode. The surroundings instantly lit up with a blinding light. Boom! A huge explosion, accompanied by countless spikes, suddenly erupted, enveloping the two of them. Invincible golden body. Max roared in anger, and an incomparably resplendent golden film of light suddenly appeared. However, the film did not appear over Max's body. Instead, it had enveloped Mia's. The powerful defensive ability, which could ignore all attacks below the level of the dragon god, had appeared over Mia's body. However, since it was not cast on Max's body, it could only last for 0.25 seconds. This duration was not long enough to completely block out the shrapnel from the explosion. Max gritted his teeth and directly pounced on Mia's body. Stab! 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 Countless sharp thorns directly pierced into Max's body. The explosion only lasted for a second, but the sharp spikes that burst forth lasted for a full 3 seconds. Once the explosion had ended, Max had turned into a hedgehog. Cough! Max directly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. It was obvious that he had suffered grave injuries. At this moment, a figure suddenly shot out from the dust of the explosion. An incomparably bright mechanical iron fist smashed towards Max. A figure suddenly shot out from the dust of the explosion. An incomparably bright mechanical iron fist directly smashed towards Max. Thud. A loud thud rang out. Max's figure was sent hurtling by a massive force. He was ruthlessly slammed into the sand not far away, raising a cloud of dust in the process. Max had received a surprisingly heavy blow. Within the dust, Bloom's figure slowly appeared. The explosive barrel that Bloom had used was a highly explosive bomb that had been specially collected from a distant island. Under Bloom's modification, the sharp thorns that were covered in poison were installed around the explosive barrel had achieved a similar effect to the shrapnel grenades in Max's previous life. Moreover, even after his initial success, Bloom did not let up. He immediately rushed up to Max to beat him up. This caused the already heavily injured Max to receive even more serious damage. Max could feel that many of his bones had been shattered. Max was in excruciating agony. His body hurt like mad, and it felt as if there were countless fire ants crawling all across his bones. The poison had already taken effect. Max trembled even as he tried to get up. However, before he could even gain his footing, he was immediately sent flying by Bloom's iron fist. Max was utterly stupefied. Why is this human completely different from all the other humans I've encountered before? He cuts straight to the chase, his movements are swift and fluid, and he's also extremely eager to finish the job. What is going on? Max was sure that the middle-aged man before him was only utilizing the brute strength of his mechanical arm to attack him. He could not detect a single ounce of mana being used. Max endured the intense pain flaring across his body and opened his mouth. A terrifying bolt of lightning dragon breath immediately condensed. Bang! Bloom raised his eyebrows and punched the ground once again, immediately dodging Max's sudden lightning dragon breath. Max mentally yelped in surprise. The distance between the two was less than 10 meters. At this distance, Max's dragon breath was supposed to be instantaneous, and yet Bloom still managed to dodge him. Are you very surprised? Bloom seemed to have sensed Max's shock and smiled faintly. His figure suddenly appeared in front of Max, and he once again punched viciously at Max. He took out the cannon from his back, loaded the dragon vanquishing bolt into it, and pressed it against Max's head. Death. An incomparably thick pressure of death finally appeared in Max's heart. This was a sixth sense that only appeared when facing a fatal crisis. In order to save Mia, Max had used his last instance of invincible golden body on her. As a result, Max had lost one of his greatest trump cards, aside from the Battle of Existence. The Battle of Existence required time to be cast. Bloom had already targeted the bolt right on top of his head. He had no chance to resist at all. The current situation was a dead end for Max. Not only that, Max had also suffered heavy injuries. Even the slightest movement would cause Max to suffer great pain. Moreover, he was also assaulted by a constant wave of nausea. The poison was spreading throughout his body, and it was infecting his internal organs. There was no way out. Max believed that the moment he made a rash move, Bloom would immediately pull the trigger and fire the dragon vanquishing bolt into his head. You need around 0.5 seconds of wind-up time to unleash your dragon breath. I bet you aren't aware of this. When that happens, blue veins will appear on your neck. As long as I pay attention to your neck, I will be able to effortlessly react and dodge your attack. Bloom said calmly. The dragon annihilation missile I prepared for you has yet to be used. What a pity. Max remained silent while glaring coldly at Bloom. This was the first time since his transmigration that he had ended up in such a sorry state. It was also the closest he had ever been to death. After a long while, Max said slowly, "Tell me your name, human." Bloom heard Max's words and smiled. I thought the villagers were lying when they said that you could speak the human tongue. I didn't expect that you, who had just been born, to have already mastered the human tongue. My name is Bloom Fredrid Doldia. Usually, people refer to me as Bloom. Are you satisfied now? It's about time I send you to meet your maker. Once you're dead, I will use your corpse to attract other dragons. Upon learning of Bloom's name, Max instantly found some memories he inherited from his ancestors. Dragon Slayer Bloom. Every generation of dragon slayers is referred by this name. Max said coldly. Bloom glanced at Marx and smiled faintly, unwilling to say anything more. This was his secret. Even though Max was already on death's door, Bloom still kept his lips sealed. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning slammed into Bloom from behind. The power of the lightning was not strong, and it could even be considered as extremely weak. The most it could do was achieve a numbing effect. However, it was enough for the current situation. This allowed Max to see the light of victory in an instant. The one who cast the silent spell was his sister, Mia. Despite the ordeal she had gone through, she still kept her consciousness intact. While Bloom was beating down Max, Mia endured her pain, and condensed her dragon breath in her mouth. Mia knew that if her aim was even slightly off, not only would she lose her life, her brother would lose his too. Mia was definitely not willing to let her brother die with her. Thus, Mia took advantage of the Bloom's lapse in attention, and unleashed her dragon breath at him. Since her aim was poor, she widened her shot to make up for it. The instant that Bloom was paralyzed, Max jumped into action. Max moved very fast to the point that most would not react in time. Even though the pain was excruciating, and his vision was fading, Max ignored it all and targeted Bloom's vital points. A piercing gale had enveloped his claws. This was the only chance for the two of them to break out of this situation. At this moment, the sudden numbness caused Bloom to temporarily lose control of his body. Max waved his razor-sharp dragon claws at him. His claws were accompanied by a whistling wind, and it was obvious that it was extremely powerful. Should an ordinary person be struck by this terrifying attack, a huge hole would undoubtedly be pierced open in their body. If that were to occur, even a powerful warrior would die instantly. One had to know that Bloom was only an ordinary person. Other than the mechanical arm that he possessed, he was unable to use even the slightest ounce of mana. It was also for this reason that Bloom was incapable of using the dragon vanquishing ballista. After all, it required mana to be used, and Bloom did not possess any. Anyone in this situation would be extremely afraid and uneasy. After all, not only were they paralyzed, they were also about to be penetrated in the chest by a dragon. However, Bloom was different. It was as though he had already expected all of this. A faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth, and he appeared extremely calm. It is indeed as I had imagined. The two of you dragon hatchlings possess a relationship that is dragons, possess a relationship is not found in any other dragons. Even the relationship between the average human siblings is not as the both of yours. I truly envy your relationship. However, everything is still under my control. Bloom said calmly. He spoke very leisurely as if he was taking a stroll in the garden and admiring the wild flowers along the path, while recalling an interesting story he had heard of. At this moment, the sound of mechanical gears churning suddenly emitted from Bloom's mechanical right arm. It was as if there was something was operating within it. Following this, the glow of his mechanical arm faded, and out appeared a crystal the size of a fingernail. The moment this fingernail-sized crystal appeared, it emitted an extremely powerful burst of energy. This powerful burst of energy was something that not even Tahir was capable of achieving. Max was shocked and he quickly increased his speed. Under his acceleration, his dragon claws had left afterimages in its wake. Although the dragon slayer, Bloom, did not possess any mana, for some reason, Max felt that the transparent crystal was extremely dangerous. The memories that had been passed down informed Max that the transparent crystal, which was only the size of a fingernail, would pose a huge threat to him. At this moment, the crystal's energy enveloped Bloom, and it overcame the paralysis that Bloom had been afflicted with. Originally, the paralysis would last for 15 seconds. However, if less than 5 seconds, the restriction on Bloom had already been lifted. Bloom moved once again. His eyes were filled with confidence. He would never fight a battle that he was not prepared for. This was his personality. Without sufficient preparation, Bloom would never make a move. However, once Bloom made his move, he would strike swiftly and lethally, just like thunder. In a way, he was like a certain nocturnal hero from the comics in Max's previous world. Thus, the moment Bloom appeared before Max and Mia, it had already meant that his preparations were complete. Bloom. His name was synonymous to being extremely cautious. Bang! Max's body was once again sent flying by Bloom's fierce punch, and he crashed heavily onto the ground. Only the sound of his body cracking could be heard again. At this moment, even Max did not know how many bones he had already broken. Roar! Max roared angrily. Mia, who heard Max's roar, seemed to understand something. Max spat out some scarlet chunks. They were probably his damaged internal organs. Waves of weakness continuously invaded Max's body. He felt as if there were waves of demons constantly whispering in his ears. "You're already tired, why don't you rest for good? Don't you want to have a good rest? Close your eyes and you'll enjoy a good sleep. You can sleep for a very, very long time, or even forever. Take as long as you like, I won't rush you." Max panted heavily, and his chest constantly heaved up and down. His claws were already trembling slightly. He could not hold on for much longer. In his current state, he could at most hold on for 2 more minutes. Max wanted to get up from the ground, but he could not find the strength to do so. He glared at Bloom, his eyes flashing with a hint of viciousness. Bloom stepped on Max's head. He once again took out the terrifying cannon, that was already filled with the dragon vanquishing bolt from his back, and pressed it on Max's head. "It's time to go, little dragon," Bloom said faintly and slowly pulled the trigger. He was not like the other humans, who, once gained the upper hand, would constantly provoke his enemies. Safety was Bloom's most important principle, and nothing can be safer than a dead enemy. Snap! The firing process had already started within the cannon. An incomparably strong pressure of death appeared in Max's heart once again. He was going to die. Max shut his eyes tightly. At this moment, another terrifying bolt of flame struck Bloom from behind. Boom! The attack was powerful, was incomparably powerful. It had struck Bloom almost instantaneously. Bloom's entire body was sent flying at this moment. The cannon that was originally pressed against Max's head instantly tilted. Kaboom! The trigger of the cannon had already been pulled. No one was able to stop the dragon vanquishing bolt from being fired. In an instant, the muzzle of the cannon flickered with blazing flames. The dragon vanquishing bolt was fired. However, due to a slight deviation, the bolt had only struck the root of Max's wings. A huge hole appeared on Max's back. Countless amounts of blood flowed out from it. Max's hard scales were scattered all over the ground. In the end, Max did not manage to escape the bolt. However, the silver lining was that the dragon-slaying arrow had only hit his wings. Other than depriving him of his ability to fly, it had not posed any other risk. In the distance, Mia noticed that her brother had narrowly escaped being struck head-on by the dragon-vanquishing bolt. Upon realizing this, she heaved a long sigh of relief. Although Bloom was resourceful and had a powerful mechanical arm, he was still an ordinary person. Unless he had managed to dodge the flame that struck him, the consequences would not fare well for him. Max struggled to get up from the ground and crawled in Bloom's direction. If Bloom had somehow managed to survive, Max would deal the finishing blow. Bloom was truly a terrifying entity. Even without the assistance of magic, he had managed to inflict such heavy wounds on Max. There was no way Max would let him go. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was only a distance of 200 meters, but it had taken Max 5 minutes to drag his battered body to reach Bloom's side. Most of Bloom's skin had turned into charcoal. Except for his right arm, which was still unharmed and good as new. At this moment, Bloom shared the same thoughts as Max. He was on his last breath, and he had completely lost his ability to fight. Despite all his feats, Bloom was still a human. As he did not prepare any countermeasures to Mia's sneak attack, he had taken the full brunt of her attack. Cough, cough, cough. Bloom's lips, which were already charred, spat out a few words with difficulty. How did you do it? Max frowned. He did not understand what Bloom was trying to say. However, he had already placed his huge claws on Bloom's neck. Max's dragon claws were extremely sharp. At this moment they were placed on Bloom's neck. With just a little strength from Max, they would be able to pierce through Bloom's neck and end Bloom's life instantly. Indeed, I have underestimated your ties. I thought that all of you would flee in the face of such a crisis. However, none of you did so. Instead, you chose to work together to overcome this crisis. I also know that I won't be able to hold on for much longer in my current state. Before I lose consciousness, can you answer my final doubt? Why was that weak little dragon able to survive my explosion? Once Bloom had finished speaking, he looked at Max and waited for his answer. I'm sorry, but this is my own secret. With that, Max stabbed his claws into Bloom's throat. The dragon slayer that everyone had sung about for a whole generation had now died at the hands of a dragon hatchling. Max shook his head helplessly. Why didn't Mia flee upon realizing the threat she was up against? Was it because she could not leave at all? Perhaps the barrier has prevented her from escaping. She might have suffered from the backlash of her own mana. Under these circumstances, even if Mia wanted to escape, she could not. Suddenly, a thought came to Max's mind. He quickly turned to look at the dead Bloom. As expected, not a single ounce of mana was coming off of him. He doesn't have any mana. And he isn't using any magic tools. Max gasped upon this realization. A great sense of danger gripped his heart once more. This area has been sealed off by a domain. In order to achieve this, one must either cast a spell or use a magic tool. Plus, this domain is on a completely different tier from the one Felix had used to contain me. This particular domain can cause my mana to backfire on me. This kind of high-level domain could not have come from a magic tool. The person who had cast this domain isn't Bloom, but someone else. Otherwise, why would Bloom think that Mia would flee? Max turned around with difficulty and cut the rope on Mia's body with his sharp claws. The injuries on Mia's body were just as bad as Max's. Max checked the injuries on Mia's body. There were 26 broken bones, and her internal organs had also suffered great injuries. They would need a long time to recover from these injuries. However, he was not worried that their injuries would leave any scars. After all, the dragons possessed a strong physique and a powerful seal-healing ability. As long as they replenished sufficient nutrition and rested, they would recover. However, should they lose their wings, tails, or limbs, there would be no hope to regain them. If they did not foresee any special heavenly and earthly treasures or elixirs, it was likely that they would leave behind permanent sequelae. Although both Max and Mia's wings had been severely injured, they were still functional. As long as they could endure through their weakest moment, Max and Mia would be able to fly soon enough. Max looked at the domain's boundary that was invisible to the naked eye. The boundary was currently blocking Max's escape route. Upon touching the boundary of the domain, the mana within one's body would go out of control and lash out at its owner. If the magic power was too great and the body was weak, the body might turn into a bomb and explode. Bloom did not have any mana within his body, and thus, he would not be affected by the domain. This is a two-layered trap. Max's brows were tightly knitted. His real enemy was hidden deep in his midst. So much so that up until now, Max had not even seen who he was facing against. Come out, Max said coldly. Although Max was extremely exhausted, and there was the possibility of him collapsing at any moment, His voice was still strong and demanding. Max's voice resounded throughout the entire domain, and it continuously echoed within it. Mia followed closely behind Max before asking him carefully. "Brother, is there any other problem?" Max protected Mia behind him and said softly, "Our real enemy hasn't appeared yet. You should have already noticed that the magic surrounding us isn't something that Bloom set up." Mia exclaimed in her heart, "The enemy is hidden so well." The 100,000-strong human army, the 3 great generals, and Bloom the Dragon Slayer had already been dealt with. However, the battle was still far from over. "Brother, did the army from before set up this domain?" Max shook his head. "They should be from different forces. Otherwise, they would not have sent themselves to their deaths." While Mia and Max were talking, the luxurious carriage hovered in the sky above them. Within it, a terrifying magic power that was like a black hole caused the surrounding scene to tremble. While Max and Mia were looking vigilantly, the carriage's door opened in the sky. Creak. Although the carriage appeared to be extremely luxurious, when it opened, the sound it made it sound like an antique carriage. With Max and Mia's sensitive hearing, they instantly caught the sound and subconsciously looked at the sky. A trace of shock flashed across Mia and Max's eyes upon noticing the carriage. The true enemy hidden was right above us all along. The source of the domain had finally been located. Had the entity in the carriage not made a sound, Mia and Max would have likely spent a long time looking for the source. The carriage door opened and an extremely old figure walked out. It was an old man who was hunched over. His skin was extremely dry, and his eyes were gloomy. His entire temperament was like that of a mummy. "Kids, please don't misunderstand. My target has never been you." The hunched old man wore a black robe and hovered in the air. His hands were supported by a crutch, and he looked down at Max and Mia from above. "The 2 of you were born with the ancient dragon talent due to Agatha's bloodline. Although both of you are indeed very outstanding, you are not worthy of my attention. Perhaps you will be very strong in the future, but this world has never lacked geniuses. The future that awaits you is not necessarily glorious. It is more likely to be full of death and sorrow." The hunchbacked old man slowly descended from the sky. The moment Max saw the hunchbacked old man approaching him, his heart became even more vigilant. Max knew that the old man was incomparably powerful, but he could not put a concrete figure to his strength. For some reason, the hunchbacked old man gave Max a particularly strange feeling. The old man clearly had the appearance of a human, but his entire body faintly emitted the aura of a dragon. Even after searching through his ancestors' memories, Max still could not find such an existence. Just what on earth is this old man? The hunchbacked old man slowly landed in front of Max, but he did not pay any attention to Max. Instead, he looked at Bloom, who was very much dead. The hunchbacked old man extended his mummy-like shriveled arm, and removed Bloom's mechanical arm. After operating it a few times, the fingernail-sized crystal came out of it and entered the old man's hand. "Are you the mastermind behind the human army's crusade?" Mark said warily from the side. The hunchbacked old man glanced at Max, but he did not deny it. "You are just the victims of this war. It doesn't make any difference to me whether you are alive or killed by humans. My goal has always been the crystal in this guy's body." Max took a step back and watched as the other party solemnly put the crystal into a magic vessel. "You have gotten what you wanted. Let us leave," Max said. The hunched old man turned his head and sneered. "Sorry, kid. Leaving is not an option. Your only choice is to become nutrients for the soil, or become nutrients for me." In the eyes of the old man, Max was already a corpse. The old man's goal was to silence Max and Mia by killing them after obtaining his crystal. What exactly was that crystal? Max could clearly feel that the old man in front of him was extremely powerful. He was even more powerful than his mother, Agatha, and the black dragon he had faced back when he was born. The old man's strength had probably surpassed that of an ancient dragon. Just what kind of existence is he? It was at this moment that the old man finally revealed his true face. Although his face was human, there were a few pieces of broken dragon scales on it. Dragonkin. The product of the fusion between human and dragon genes. In his mind, although there were words describing the current stooped old man, there was no detailed information. All Max knew was that the old man before him possessed the bloodline of both the dragon and human race. However, dragons and humans were natural enemies. How could they produce offspring? This was simply unbelievable. Max did not believe that there was really a dragon that was willing to lower its pride and have intercourse with the human race. Die quietly, kid. The old man's face was emotionless. He slowly raised his right hand and directly grabbed at the air in Max's direction. In an instant, a powerful projection of mana solidified before him. An incomparably huge dragon claw that was made out of mana grabbed in Max's direction. The dragon claw was over 10 meters tall. It even surpassed Max's height. In front of this huge dragon claw, Max appeared tiny. Max dared not hesitate and immediately set off to protect his sister. With a pathetic roll, he managed to avoid the dragon claw by a hair's breadth. Boom! A huge crater appeared in the desert. This was created by the aftershock of the huge dragon claw. Upon realizing his attack had failed, the old man launched yet another attack. Max turned his head to look at the terrifying aftershock. The half-breed Dragonkin's strength had probably surpassed that on an ancient dragon. The dragons that ranked above ancient dragons were known as immemorial dragons. Although they were a single rank apart, the strength of immemorial dragons had far surpassed ancient dragons. It was not an exaggeration to say that they existed on different tiers. They were able to easily control the magic they possessed, and they could even control the elemental energy within the air. Upon reaching the rank of an immemorial dragon, one could replenish their energy from their surroundings at any time. They would no longer fear not possessing enough mana to unleash their magic. By Max's estimates, there was an 80 to 90% chance that the old man had reached the rank of an immemorial dragon. For an enemy of this level, unless he used the battle of existence, he simply had no chance of winning. Not even the slightest chance. An immemorial dragon could crush ancient dragons without even breaking a sweat. Whatever talent, strength, or willpower one had, in the face of supreme strength, it was completely useless. Max hastily muttered the chant to begin the battle of existence. As you can see, Mother Tiamat. My life has been seriously threatened, and I have no way to overcome this difference in strength. But I have not lost my will to fight. For the continuation of the Red Dragon's bloodline. For your eminence to forever resound throughout the world. The battle of existence must not be abused. This was something that Max was very clear about. After all, it was a secret technique from ancient times. At the same time, it was also the fastest way to become a god. In order to prevent it from being abused, the gods were very cautious about its usage. The prerequisite for activating it was that one side needed to be in a fatal threat. Only then would they be allowed to activate the battle of existence. Otherwise, if they used it casually, they would be disapproved by the gods and they would be punished. At this moment, Max was forced into such a desperate situation. 1. I, Max Agatha Hill Alexander. I propose a battle of existence to my opponent. I am willing to bet my life, wealth, talent, and even existence on a battle of past, present, and future. Following the end of Max's declaration, the huge dragon claw, which was about to splat them like a bug, suddenly stopped and turned black and white. The origin space was independent of the outside world, and everything in there seemed to be stationary. The hunchbacked old man slowly looked at Max. A shocked expression flashed across his eyes. The little dragon that had only been born not long ago was using a battle of existence against him. This was a powerful forbidden technique that had been sealed by the gods due to it being abused in the ancient times. Just who on earth is this little dragon to be capable of using this forbidden technique? However, the hunchbacked old man was not worried. After all, his strength was at the level of a genuine immemorial dragon. Although he was a mixed-blood Dragonkin and possessed the blood of both humans and dragons, it was also because of this that he possessed the strengths of both races. It was for this reason that he had managed to ascend to the rank of immemorial dragon. Although the little dragon before him was of an ancient dragon bloodline, its chances of becoming an immemorial dragon was 1 in 100. It would most likely never reach the same rank as him within its lifespan. Moreover, the strength of the hunchback old man was beyond most immemorial dragons. Could this dragon hatchling's prime form be stronger than mine? Plus, this might not even be my prime. Once I'm done here and have received my reward by the higher-ups, it should not pose a problem for my strength to reach the limits of immemorial dragons. As long as he reached the limit of an immemorial dragon, it was not impossible for him to break through again in the next 100 years. He was already an incomparably strong, and was respected by tens of thousands of people. How could he be compared to a mere dragon hatchling? If he were to truly meet his match against Max, it would be too embarrassing. In the origin space, everything had turned black and white. It was as if everything in this space was meaningless. Max, who was already covered in injuries, and the hunchbacked old man appeared in the two corners of the space. Behind them, there were countless balls of light floating. They were the memories of future past that they had, and would encounter in the future. The balls of light were accumulating, and in a blink of an eye, hundreds of them had gathered around the hunchbacked old man. Moreover, their number was still increasing. Should things continue to proceed, it was likely that he would gain more than 1,000 of the light orbs. On the other hand, there were only a dozen or so light orbs floating around Max. I was offering you a highway to heaven, but you've chosen to reject me. Fine then, brat, suit yourself. The hunchbacked old man looked mockingly at Max in the distance. It was as if he was already certain that he would devour Max's existence. As long as he was able to emerge victorious in the battle of existence, he would be able to directly devour the other party. The hunchbacked old man only knew about the battle of existence, but he did not know how to use it. Thus, he was excited to see how strong he would become once he absorbed Max's existence. With this thought in mind, greed flashed across the eyes of the hunchbacked old man. Suddenly, the entire origin space trembled. Countless densely packed cracks appeared in the space. At the beginning, the cracks were only the size of spider silk. However, as time went on, they gradually reached the thickness of an arm. The entire space was filled with these cracks. What's going on? The hunchbacked old man was shocked by this sudden change. From what he had heard, the origin space was supposed to be a stable domain, but what he was experiencing at the moment felt as if the space itself was about to shatter. What is happening? Should this space shatter, then this battle of life and death, which had yet to determine a victor, would devour the both of us and eliminate us from existence. Max was still calmly prostrating on the spot. He, who was already heavily injured, had no time nor energy to care about the changes in the space. Damn it, I cannot die in this place. Mother Tiamat, please bless me, who is of impure blood, so that I can immediately display my strongest strength. The hunchbacked old man snorted coldly and muttered something. Immediately after, countless light orbs attached themselves to his body, and his body began to change. His originally aged skin gradually became elastic. His originally hunched back also straightened. A moment ago, he was still a hunchbacked and weak old man, but now, he had become a strong and muscular. Endless strength and mana coursed through his veins. If he felt like it, he could destroy an entire nation in a blink of an eye. The various elemental spirits in the space seemed to have become his subordinates. With just a thought, he could instantly release the magic he wanted. Oh! 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 My power feels limitless. Is this the limit of an immemorial dragon? I feel that I can become even stronger. The hunchbacked old man laughed loudly. He looked at Max, who was still lying limply on the ground in the distance. A smile flashed across his eyes. He was already confident in winning this battle of existence. However, at this moment, the sky, which was already filled with cracks, suddenly split open. A majestic beam of light descended from the sky and instantly obliterated the hunchbacked old man into nothingness. It was an extremely terrifying display of strength, and no sound was emitted. The last gaze of the hunchbacked old man before he died was filled with incomparable fear. Only God knew what kind of existence he had seen from beyond the shattered sky. Max had won. Yeah, the author repeated the passages from when Max fought Tahir. The origin space formed by the battle of existence suddenly scattered. Max's body slowly descended from the sky to the ground. At this moment, there was no longer the figure of the hunchbacked old man around. In the sky, the incomparably luxurious carriage seemed to have lost its source of power, and it plummeted into the ground. Max opened his eyes slowly. A bright light emitted from his eyes. After completely devouring the attributes of the hunchbacked old man, Max, who was supposed to be gravely wounded, had regained his strength, although his physical body had not completely recovered. Even though his internal organs had been seriously injured and his bones and wings were close to being shattered, after devouring the half-blood Dragonkin who possessed the strength of an immemorial dragon, Max was certain that he would make a full recovery within 3 days. "Brother, are you all right?" Mia hurriedly went up to him. However, due to her injuries, every step she took caused great pain to her. Max could clearly see the cold sweat that was seeping out of Mia's body for every step she took. "Mia, rest well. All threats have been eliminated." Max looked into the distance. The domain magic that had trapped the siblings in this area had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it were never there. Threats eliminated. Mia was a little confused by Max's words, and a hint of confusion flashed across her eyes. This was Mia's first battle ever since she was born, and it had lasted for such a long time. Mia, who was already extremely exhausted, had to push herself to prevent herself from fainting. At that moment, her most trusted brother, Max, had just informed her that the danger has passed. Upon registering his words, her body immediately went limp and she collapsed in the desert. She had fainted. Max quickly went forward to check on Mia's physical condition. The more he checked, the more shocked Max became. Mia's physical condition had always been very poor. Now that she had been injured by Bloom, and had not been treated for so long, some of the organs in her body had begun to fail. Should the situation continue, her failing organs might take her life. Max frowned. Although dragons had strong healing abilities, this only applied to ordinary dragons. For a red dragon like Mia, who was born extremely weak in the first place, that might not be the case. Max quickly carried Mia on his back. While enduring the pain of his muscles being torn apart, he forcefully spread his wings and flew back into the lair with Mia. Mia seemed to have fainted. Her presence on his back became weaker and weaker. "System, show me Mia's stats," Max said solemnly. A mechanical voice without gender suddenly sounded in Max's mind. Then, a stats interface appeared before Max's vision. Naturally, he was the only one who could see it. Ding dong. Showing Mia's stats. True name, Mia Agatha Affendor. Race, Red Dragon, Lawful Evil. Current dragon rank, Young Dragon. Age, 1. Maximum lifespan, 10,000, Ancient Dragon. Attack, 2, Original Attribute, 5. Spell Strength, 17, Original Attribute, 250. Defense, 0, Original Attribute, 7. Speed, 0, Original Attribute, 12. Magic, Lightning Arrow, Magical Acceleration. Ability, Bite. Breath, Lightning. Remarks, an extremely weak red dragon. In its current state, even an unarmed young human could easily kill it. Max frowned and cursed inwardly. Damn it. Mia's injuries were already extremely dangerous. If he could not stop her internal organs from failing, it was likely that Mia would completely lose her vitality within a day. Max frowned. At this moment, he did not care about his injuries. He immediately unleashed a thunderous divine retribution around the lair. Although its power was rather weak, its paralyzing effects that lingered would last for several hours without dissipating. Since Mia did not have any defensive abilities at the moment, even an ordinary human was capable of killing her. Max needed to leave Mia's side for a while, and thus, he needed to ensure her safety before all else. After confirming that his surroundings were completely safe, Max suddenly flapped his wings and rushed towards the village in the distance. He was headed in the direction of Deer Heart Village. Within Deer Heart Village, the villagers were under constant fear. They had not slept all night, even as the sun was rising from the horizon. The frightening sound and aftershocks from the human army crusading against the dragons in the distance had caused them to tremble in fear. They originally thought that no matter how powerful the dragons were, so long as the kingdom was willing, they would be able to easily dispatch them. However, after all the tremors they had felt, as well as a thunderous explosion that rocked them to their core, they started becoming afraid. They were merely ordinary civilians. If the range of the battle was a little closer to them, just a few aftershocks from the battle would be able to annihilate their entire Deer Heart village in an instant. All the villagers gathered together. Strong youths and adults protected the elderly, the weak, women and children within. They curled up in a corner and looked at the distance while shivering. The previous terrifying attacks from Calcis, Felix, and everyone else had instilled a deep fear within them. The scale of the battle was beyond what they could imagine. All they wanted was to live a peaceful life. Was this request too much? Now they even missed the time when they were ruled by the dragon Agatha. After all, although Agatha would exploit them and eat their children, she would not completely wipe out Deer Heart Village. As for the current situation of the Dragon Crusade, the human army's momentum seemed to indicate that it would destroy the dragons along with everything within the region. Once the hunchbacked old man was finally killed, the long period of peace made them look at each other in dismay. Deer Heart Village was dozens of kilometers away from the battlefield. They did not have any ability to observe the situation on the battlefield. Thus they could only guess what had happened. Agatha has been defeated. It must be, otherwise how could there be no movement? Or could the human army have been defeated by Agatha? After all, you should know of Lady Agatha's fearsome strength. Look! Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted, and everyone subconsciously looked towards the horizon. It was a red dragon hatchling. The villagers of Deer Heart Village looked at the red dragon, Max, who was flying towards them in the distance, and they were completely devastated. What was going on? Wasn't the human army supposed to bring down the dragons? Even if they failed to kill that ancient dragon, Agatha, they should at least be able to kill two weak dragon hatchlings, right? Generals of the human army. Just what on earth did you feed your soldiers? Only rice. The old village chief had blown a fuse. He clearly remembered that the 100,000-strong dragon extermination army had brought along an astronomical number of weapons to deal with the dragons. Could the powerful shockwaves we felt be from the human army partying with these red dragons? However, at this point, the red dragon Max had already reached the village. Although Max was only a newborn dragon hatchling, the old village chief still dared not treat him lightly. After all, Agatha had purposefully brought both of her children to meet Deer Heart Village. Should they show any disrespect to Max, it would be akin to disrespecting Agatha. Once that happened, Deer Heart Village would undoubtedly suffer the wrath of Agatha, a disaster that they could not risk causing. The old village chief walked respectfully towards Max while thinking to himself, as long as I show him my utmost respect, we'll be fine. After all, we have Tahir's descendant in our village. As long as we can keep her alive, we'll eventually be able to break free from Agatha's clutches and regain our freedom. Her long-reigning tyranny will finally come to an end. Presently, the remaining descendant of Tahir, Emily, had just experienced her second full moon, and even so, she was already capable of unleashing countless spells. Moreover, her spell strength had already surpassed what most mages could ever hope to reach within their lifetimes. Her strength had rekindled their hope for the future. The old village chief could not wait to see the day when Emily finally grew up and defeated Agatha. Damn dragons, we have been enduring your tyranny throughout all this time. But once we obtain enough strength, we will finally put an end to your lives." The muscles on the village chief's face curled into a sly smile in this moment. Max flapped his wings and slowly landed. Max was in a foul mood due to Mia's condition. "Give me everything you have that contains curative properties." Max spoke slowly, but his tone left no room for the village chief to negotiate. The village chief was momentarily stunned by Max's words. However, upon realizing what they meant, he suddenly trembled. This dragon hatchling couldn't be more than a year old, and now, he's come to our village in search of healing items. Could it be because Agatha has been severely injured? The moment this thought crossed the village chief's mind, he was thrilled. However, he could not show his excitement. After all, he was facing a dragon who, although was only a hatchling, was capable of ending his life whenever he wanted. Ha 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 ha. Red Dragon. Agatha. Retribution. All of this is your retribution. You commit evil deeds, bully Deerheart Village, and exploit our villagers daily. And yet, now that you're injured, you still have to bow down and come to us for resources. The village chief was ecstatic, but he had to force himself to hold back his laughter. For a moment, the village chief's entire body trembled non-stop. Max frowned and snapped coldly. "What, do you not have curative items?" A strong pressure was emitted from Max's body. Max had just gone through an incomparably arduous battle. He did not bother concealing the killing aura from said battle. Max glared at the old village chief. As a result, the chief's body quivered one final time, and the excitement contained within him immediately vanished. The old village chief felt as if he had fallen into a frozen cellar in that moment. A wave of terror seeped into the village chief's heart. His body trembled once more, however, it was not because of excitement but fear. He had been too complacent. Even if Agatha is seriously injured, the two dragon hatchlings might still be capable of wiping out our village. After all, it was Agatha's idea to keep our village alive and running, but her children might not share her need for our village. Should we stoke her children's ire and cause our village's demise, Agatha might just sit idly by. After all, to Agatha, Deerheart Village is nothing more than cattle waiting to be slaughtered. With this thought in mind, the old village chief immediately turned serious. "I must not be careless here. The fate of the entire village is now in my hands. One misstep here, and Deerheart Village might be annihilated. Oh, Lord Dragon Hatchling. I was just momentarily intimidated by your might. I will now give you all the healing items within Deerheart Village." The old village chief hurriedly finished his words and trotted back to the villagers. Under his orders, quite a number of young men quickly came out carrying quite a number of curative items. As one of the places that travelers frequently visited within the desert, Deerheart Village was well equipped with medicine. Not only did possess antidotes for poison, they even owned several rare herbs. "Lord Dragon Hatchling, is this what you desire?" After packing 3 whole boxes of medicinal items for Max, the old village chief knelt in front of Max with great respect and asked, "This time, I will forgive your sin of disrespecting me. Should this happen again, you can kiss Tahir's descendant goodbye." Max snorted coldly and grabbed the medicine. Then, he spread his wings and flew into the distance. The flap of Max's wings had indirectly caused a whirlwind to form. Upon hearing those words, the old village chief felt as if his entire body had been electrocuted. He was in utter disbelief. His strength drained from his body. His legs went soft and he directly knelt on the ground. He muttered dully. The dragon hatchling knows everything." Max had returned to his lair. After confirming Mia's injuries once again, Max frowned. As expected, Mia's injuries are getting more and more serious. Due to her weak body, Mia's self-recovery ability was extremely poor. Even though the damage that Mia had suffered was not even 1/3 of Max's, it was still enough to take Mia's life. It had only been a short while since Max had left, and yet, Mia's life force had already weakened greatly. At her current condition, she did not even have the strength to move her claws. Even opening her eyes had proven to be an arduous task for Mia. Many wounds on her body were still bleeding slightly. Any other dragon, even if they were newborns, would at least be able to stop their bleeding. However, Mia was unable to do so. Her body was too weak. The system had already given Mia a conclusion before she was even born. Without someone to protect her, Mia would definitely not live to adulthood. Max looked at Mia's wound with heartache. He ground the healing herbs into powder and wiped it on Mia's wound. Mia's weak body was not something she had chosen of her own free will. On the contrary, because of her weak body, Mia had a stronger will than most dragons at her age. It could be said that even many adventurers were incapable of matching Mia's determination. Max applied the medicinal herbs over Mia's wound, and as if she had absorbed the healing energy contained, her blood soon stopped flowing out of her wounds. However, the wounds were still there. They showed no signs of healing. If it were Max, the wound on his skin would have already healed fully at this point. Could there be such a huge difference in abilities between dragons? Max frowned. Should the situation continue any further, even a simple bacterial infection would be able to take Mia's life. Max shook his head helplessly and said to Mia, whose eyes were tightly shut. It was unknown whether she had already lost consciousness or not. Mia, this might hurt a little. I'll need you to bear with it. With that, Max opened his huge mouth, and fierce flames burst out from it. A fire spell. It was an ability that he had obtained from devouring Tahir. Although he had devoured the mixed-blood Dragonkin, Max, who had yet to take a nap, did not obtain his power. The flames burned around Mia's wound. Max wanted to disinfect Mia's wound. Mia's body trembled. Max's fire spell had caused great pain to her. Ding dong. In Max's mind, the mechanical voice of the system suddenly appeared. Then, a familiar interface appeared in front of Max. Host Max, the immediate danger has now passed. However, your sister has entered a deep slumber. In the face of this situation, please make your choice. 1. I am a proud red dragon, family means nothing to me. Why should I care about my sister? Ignore the heavily injured Mia. Mia's probability of death will increase by 500%. Reward, language of death ability that gives you the ability to control most undead creatures. 2. The weak Mia is too much of a burden for me, but she's still my sister, so I'll save her. As long as she's breathing, I don't care about anything else. At the very least, I have to help Mia get out of her predicament. Obtain language of death, undead calamity. Upon death, you will immediately transform into an ancient undead dragon. As a result of this transformation, you will gain the enmity of the mother goddess Tiamat. 3. Now that mother has left, I'm the only one that Mia can rely upon. If I abandon her here, where else will Mia seek protection from? Head to the Moldos Plateau, locate the dark snow lotus crystal, and get rid of Mia's frail constitution for good. Rewards, frozen dragon coffin, improve Mia's physique greatly while she falls into a deep slumber, and bestow upon her an affinity for the ice element. 1. Max was stunned by what he read. Although the system had given Max 3 different options, the third option was his one and only choice. Moreover, the rewards from the third option had caused Max's eyes to light up. Not only would it completely rid Mia of her weak physique, it would even provide her with an affinity for the ice attribute. Although he did not know whether this would permanently solve her issue of needing protection, at the very least, she would no longer be a dead weight in battle. Max announced to the system without an ounce of hesitation. I choose the third option. The moment Max's voice subsided, the system's voice rang out in his mind once more. Option chosen successfully. The frozen dragon coffin will now be distributed. The remaining rewards will be distributed once the host has completed Mia's treatment. At the same time, a transparent blue screen that only Max could see slowly unfolded before him. There was a red dot on the screen. The red dot was surrounded by several mountains, and layering above those mountains was a line of text in an ancient language. The northernmost part of the continent. Moldos. Snow Mountain. It was a region that held the key to solving his sister's weakness. Following this, a huge coffin appeared in front of Max. The coffin was made entirely of ice. Although it looked cold and devoid of life, for some unknown reason, it emitted a little bit of vitality. With this coffin, Mia's body would not deteriorate for the time being. In fact, she would even recover slowly. Max placed the unconscious Mia into the coffin. It was taboo to place a living person into a coffin. However, both Max and Mia were dragons. They did not share the same beliefs as the humans. So long as it would increase their strength, they would happily welcome anything. Max slowly covered the frozen dragon coffin, dug a large hole within the lair, and buried Mia in it. After confirming that it was safe, Max slowly caressed the soil on the ground. After taking one last look at the lair where he and Mia were born in, he muttered and flew away without looking back. Mia, wait for me. This time, he did not know how long he would be gone for. What was certain, however, was that by the time he returned, Mia would be awake. One could be adaptability to the cold as well, further context is needed.